What scares you most about the state of the planet?
You can see the consequences. You can see that the change is happening now. We can't sit back and say, it's nature, it's going to happen. It's not nature. My fear now is people not realizing that we are already beyond that 1.5 degrees. We used to talk about the Gulf Stream. We've now been told that in our lifetime, the risk is very, very high that Gulf Stream will reverse. And the consequences of that will be immediate. Resistance and protest is really important, but putting something into the market that makes a difference, that shows that things can be done differently, was the better way to go. And to be fearful can be paralyzing, and to be paralyzed means you're not doing anything. So I would say be more like Boudica and face your worst enemy and defeat it.
The UK is famous for many things, Harry Potter, Queen Elizabeth, but I think this lady deserves a similar accolade. My next guest is a Stevie Award winner. She's an eco-warrior and a trailblazing entrepreneur. Susie Hewson, welcome to The Ginny Show.
Thank you for having me, Ginny. Nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you too, Susie, because reading up about you, I'm just fascinated by your passion and your drive and really the alignment that you have in really making the world literally a better and more eco-friendly place. I read an article recently on Time where they talked about feminine hygiene products being contaminated by forever chemicals, which I'm sure you know about. There are chemicals that have been linked to a range of health ills, including decreased fertility, high blood pressure in pregnant people, increased risks of certain cancers, developmental delays, and low birth weight in children. The list goes on and on. Yikes. When I read this, I was quite alarmed because 50% of the population, let's just say, rely on these products and industry to take care of us and be good to us. But we need these products. It's not like we can't be without them. So what are your thoughts on that?
PFAs, I mean, I've known about these for over a decade. And in actual fact, I mean, a water company actually contacted me and said, what should we be looking for in our water supplies? Because we know and I said, you need to be looking for PFAs, but good luck with that because they're very hard to detect and it's impossible to take out the water. And so my concerns goes back to looking at how you design a product, how you look at what raw materials are made from, validity of declarations that something is free from. It's easy to do. You just have to take the time and effort and do the testing. Don't rely on someone saying, oh, yes, it's great. But PFAs are serious issues and they come from many areas. I mean, washable period products, notorious for containing them because of the coating on the layer that prevents leakage. It's the same material that is used for sports jackets. So if you're going out in a golf jacket or a hiking jacket, it has the same coatings on it. So obviously when you wash the product, it's washed out into the water. So it takes 3 washers to wash the PFAs out of a reusable, washable period underwear or any other item that contains those coatings. But that's okay, it's great for you as a user. Now everyone else who never considered this now have it in their water supply. So it is a very serious, I'm sorry to bring with the bringing of doom, but it is a serious environmental problem. And it actually goes back to like non-stick pans. It's the same material. So if you're cooking with your old grandma's non-stick pan, I would probably, put some, use it for something else, but don't cook with it. There are many things we should be looking at that have these coatings in that we should be excluding from our life to protect our own health, and maybe even to sort of, do a little bit of examination of your water companies to say, what are you doing to help protect us from this material in our drinking water?
And I want to go into your journey personally because you've been an eco-warrior for almost 4 decades. Why did you dedicate your life to this objective? out of all the objectives that you could have had in your skill set, what really drove you here?
I mean, I was brought up in an inner city area in Nottingham, actually in the Midlands. And like many children, and probably even lots of people now live in apartments that don't have gardens. The sort of getting out into nature was going to my father's allotment or going to my uncle's farm. So nature for me was a place that was a beautiful place to be. So I've always been involved with projects that look after nature, whether it's in, my own garden, in helping us with the conservation corps as an environmentalist. And I moved to Sweden in the late 70s. And I was learning Swedish and learning to read. And so on my route, on my cycle in each day to study, there was a reed that ran along the side of the cycle path. And every day it was a different color. I mean, sometimes it's green and yellowy orange. Why is this water this color? And I was actually part of a local organization, Friends of the Earth in Sweden. And we looked at this and realized that it was coming from factory that was producing pulp, processing pulp and producing disposable products. So it didn't seem right. And we were sort of part of a campaign that we had to bring changes to environmental law in Sweden. And from that, the sort of Swedish protocol was going to spread out quite significantly on environmental management. So that was a sort of first trigger, but I thought, okay, we've worked on that. And it was years later when I saw this program about what I already knew about dioxins in the environment because of the work that Greenpeace were doing around Agent Orange and dumping of chlorine into the oceans. So I saw this program, World in Action. It's broadcast here in the UK about exactly about this, the disposables industry and the pulping industry, and how the bleaching of the pulp to produce pulp that is the absorbent part of, paper, is producing paper, coffee filters, just the same, toilet paper, how it was creating environmental damage and damaging life around these pools that come from the pulping industry. So I really disconnected with it. This was what I'd witnessed less than 10 years ago. And now I can see what we're being told, that this is not an issue, is not true. So I took my two young boys, and I thought, I feel so mad about this. I seem to have so much knowledge about this, and also my connections to the textiles industry, that I just felt I had to do something about it. And I've tried several times to stop things happening. I've been on lots of protests, anti-whaling, tied myself to trees to stop forests being chopped down. But I knew from this point that resistance and protest is really important, but putting something into the market that makes a difference, that shows that things can be done differently, was the better way to go. And that, in a madness at 1 o'clock in the morning after this program, I'd made that decision. And from there, the last 4 decades have been not my entire life, but 12 hours of every day awake time, trying to correct this and campaign for better ways forward.
So 4 decades of your life, you've been creating products, putting into the marketplace, and, it's truly inspiring, Susie. What was the first product that you put into the marketplace?
Well, the first thing I wanted to resolve was the pulping, the issue to do with pulp, because it was all chlorine bleached. And even today, the majority of it is still chlorine bleached, but we use totally chlorine-free pulp. So the first product was were 3 maxi pads and a pant liner. And at the same time, maybe a couple of years, maybe just 1 or 2 years along the way, I was in conversations with a Dutchman, strange enough, who lived in Sweden. Most of my friends were in Sweden. And he was doing some work because toxic shock was, at this point, this was, women were dying of toxic shocks. I hadn't been looking at the possibility of a tampon. My resolve was to deal with what was happening in the environment from the pulping industry. So he was doing some work on just making rolls of cotton to be replaced. The sort of synthetics were commonly widely used in the tampon industry. And I'd said, well, what do you do with it? What are you going to do with this? What's your, he says, well, I'm just for my own investigation, if you like. And I said, I want to take that to market. I want to be able to take that to market. And so that was probably 1992, I think. We had a non-applicator tampon. And it was then, that same time we decided we were going to launch into America. The insanity, if you want to think about it, with a non-applicator tampon, is like 90% of users in America are applicator tampons. But it was the fact that the issues I had to talk about, I had to undo people's knowledge or what they thought was the facts about the products they were using. So really, I was pulp products initially, and then the tampon a few years afterwards, but in development through that time, but launched 2 years after the pads and the pant liner.
Interesting, Susie, because 4 decades ago, there wasn't social media. So to educate people and build community would have been quite different to what it is now. What did you do?
The concept of the internet is amazing that you can say, "Oh, I've got no signal." Yes, try. I actually started in this room. Literally, this now is my kids' music room, but this was my office. And yes, there was no internet. So, but there was a library in Bristol. There's a research library. That was the only place to go and find back documents. I went through yellow pages or green pages or whatever color they are to find out who I needed to contact. I made late night phone calls to research centers in America to talk to people who've been doing research in cotton in tampons like Bergdahl. These were times where the telephone was the key thing. And in North America, which was not the same as it was here in the UK, you needed to know the extension that you needed to talk to. So it's a lot of frustration. So really it was tenacity of digging deep for research, hours and hours and years in the library, and just sitting on the phone, writing. And also there was no faxes then either. No printers. It was just very difficult. But it was difficult, but I didn't know any different. When the internet was available for us, 95, I think, we went online and had our own website. That I was just talking to guys in research centers in North America, because they're only other people who got access to the internet and had a computer, because it's all dial-up even. I mean, wonderful what we've got here. But yes, it was a difficult time, because that conversation I needed to have with a broad audience of consumers, media, was very, very difficult, because media at that time was essentially published magazines, newspapers, and all tied up with advertising budgets. So I might be talking to an editor who was so wanted to run with the issues I was raising. But, once their advertising department found out and starts introducing tampon or pad brands to this concept, the whole thing fell flat, with the exception of one very fine publication that now, sadly, for the last couple of years, has not existed, which is the Village Voice. So they ran a whole expose where they featured us in that report, along the same time that research was being done, which included our tampons in toxic shock and the impact of fibers on toxic shock syndrome. So it was a whirlwind time of no dial-up, no nothing, just the phone.
Wow. How did you manage to stay resourceful, relevant, and I guess build a business of such longevity? Because there are businesses nowadays that are closing very quickly, but you've maintained this business for 4 decades and obviously built a legacy to parallel that.
My maiden name and my surname is Hewson. And at school, for whatever reason, and my son gets it the same, there was always a T dropped into it, and that whole thing, Houston, we have a problem. And so for me, looking for problems that need to be solved was continuous in this category. And so being relevant was two things really. Was we developed the ultra pads and the ultra extra pads. I developed moist tissues that were past the flushability standards defined by the water industry. We were certified organic. The relevance was, we were organic before organic was a thing outside of food. So even telling people what organic was about or even what the global organic textiles was about in North America was quite difficult. But I have to say that North American consumers, women and supporters were carrying us and our message the whole time. They had confidence in what we're doing, but they also trusted they trusted the source of the information that was given. And I think that's where your validity comes from. One is making sure that you have full transparency. Every claim that we make is substantiated by independent validation or certification or testing, that you're always honest and that you resolve problems as they come along. So the plastic-free issue, when I first started, there were no biodegradable plastics or any kind of thing other than polyethylene. So we had to use like airlaid that were fiber-based. But as soon as technology was moving along, and that was like 96, I think, the first biodegradable film came out, and we used it in our ultra pads. And it was quite funny because the film rustled. I mean, I always used to think, oh gosh, people can hear you wearing our pads because they rustled, but they didn't rustle that loud. But for me, they were rustling. But it was a case of meet those needs. I'd seen plastic as an issue forever, but there was nothing to replace it, to make the product functional. And key thing, when you're addressing an environmental issue and a functioning quality issue, if it doesn't work, and as much as someone says, I really want to support this, I really want to remove those toxic chemicals from my life, I really want to remove this from my life, but it doesn't work. I was very conscious that we had to conform to that very quickly. So 1996 was the first time we had a biodegradable fill in our pads. But my objective from the very beginning, which taken me a long, long time, because you need to wait for standards and regulations to validate your claims, was to be compostable. So we submitted our products for TÜV testing to compostability, which is here in Europe is EN 13485, in America ASTM D6. I know these numbers off the top of my head. I've had them for 5 years because we had to keep modifying things because initially we wanted to be home compostable, which is at 28C. I don't know what that. Sorry, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's like if you stick your finger in your garden compost, it doesn't burn. Let's put it that way. But we tested for home composting. We only got to like 89%, and you need to be at 90% and over. So then we reverted to industrial composting. So that was always an objective for us to get this circularity and achieve that. Well, we achieved it almost 2 years back now, but it took us quite a while for them to issue the certification. So being relevant is always moving that bar up. Always looking to challenge things that are not right with your product, that makes a difference to the end use, to the end, because we have a lot of problems pile up if you're not compostable, or if you're not reusable, it is an environmental problem. So you can solve one problem by removing all these upstream issues, but if you create and if you move it somewhere else, then that becomes another problem that we really wanted to resolve. And thankfully, we did.
What was the team that you had with this, Susie? Because obviously, when you think about like nowadays, we've got technology to speed and advance. And I guess that test iteration cycle is a lot quicker, but you wouldn't have access to that when you started. But how did you develop this over time to the standards and codes of compliance that you needed to?
The first thing was sourcing the raw materials, and they are very simple materials. So organic cotton is a non-woven. Totally chlorine-free pulp from ecologically managed forests. So they'll come from Scandinavia. They're softwood, fast-growing pines. Those as materials. Well, actually, organic cotton non-woven was not easily available. They are simple materials. The biofilm was something that's evolved over time. We don't use superabsorbents. So it really was, knowing what a composition of a pad needed to be, but replacing the nature of the sourcing or how they were processed to make those things different. I didn't really have to add anything that was, invented by NASA. Most products are over-engineered, to be honest. So you can cut open a pad and they're full of polyacrylates, which are making microplastics, which are super absorbents. The amount that you could use one pad for hours and hours and hours and end before all that super absorbent we used up. So it was a case of testing using, I used contract manufacturers that were all based in Europe, all shared my ethos. So very supportive. in doing all the testing on their machines for very small runs. But in honesty, it took, once I'd sourced the raw materials to get a product to market, maybe 6 months, no more than that. It took longer to think of the brand name. It was basically taking out those over-engineered synthetic ingredients and delivering a product that was still a quality product.
You've been developing products, making them organic, making them very up to code and standard. With the state of what the planet's in at the moment, what are you concerned about the planet's health?
I am continuously anxious, I have to say. I was talking to my sister. My sister is my SEO up in North America. And I was talking to her about this yesterday, about my constant state of anxiety. And maybe that's what makes you empathetic. Maybe being anxious makes you empathetic with whatever a scenario. So I'm anxious about the environment. I'm anxious about people. I'm anxious about lack of empathy in people. So, but I used to be a coordinator for Friends of the Earth. Back in here in the UK many years ago, and I used to have a team that worked with me, and you could find those people who were paralyzed by a problem such that they couldn't do anything. Their anxiety levels were skyrocketing, and it basically paralyzed them from making any difference. And I always said, you can only address those things that are right in front of you. You find those things that you can have the greatest impact, even though they may be small. It's like driving a wedge into a rock. And once you've done that, then you can start to chip out from the edges. So I control my anxiety about the world by looking at it in those small compartments. And I also look to what other organizations are doing, what young people are doing, because I was a campaigner back in when I was an art college. We were all radical art students. We all want to change the world, and nothing's changed. And I don't want to sit here and say, I've been telling you that since the 70s. Why hasn't anything happened? Because we are less in control of change. The way that our global existence is that people are less in control of their own destinies and being able to make change. But I kind of alleviate that by saying, you know what, I can see that people are making a difference. People are turning up to make their voices heard. They are signing their names on petitions. They are choosing products that are conscious of the need to be better for the environment. So in that way, I'm hopeful. I have to be hopeful. I probably consider myself as a glass half full rather than a glass half empty. I am anxious for where we are now, but I am hopeful when I see organizations of people who are raising their voices, saying this is not right. We have to change this. The global plastics treaty, it most definitely will go ahead. It will definitely go ahead. But if we're looking at organizations to, concerns about keeping oil in the ground, we know that the oil industry is not going to change. So we have to look at where are the organizations that are going to help make that change? Is it the way we look at our insurance policies? Who are those agencies, insuring the oil industry? There is so much that we can do around the surroundings. So I want people not to give up hope, but I also want them not to give up having empathy for things that aren't right, because that's what keeps me going, and I'll keep on going till I drop dead, I suppose.
What scares you most about the state of the planet, or makes you most anxious?
There is a lot to be afraid of, I have to say. I mean, I can see what the consequences are already. I mean, I was in New York a few weeks ago, and it's November. There should be ice storms. It was 28 degrees. The south of France, although people think south of France is warm in November, it should be around 15 centigrade. It was 29. We've had here in the southwest of England, we've had heavy, torrential rains and flooding in Spain. And you can see the consequences. You can see that the change is happening now. My fear is that there's so much anti-climate speak coming through social media from billionaires, from corporates, that they're not thinking about the future. They're thinking about their profits. And they're thinking about control of power so that regulations can't be changed. I feel that that's a problem. all over the world. It's not just North America. It's happening in France, where there's a seas of power for this. It's happening in India. It's happening in Africa. And we've got corporates going in and looking to ravage raw materials from the earth at the cheapest cost without any consequence of that. That more than anything, that frightens me the most, because I have no control. I have no real control of that. I can fear for it, and I can make choices that mean that I'm not supporting those companies. I'm not buying my, insurance from that company. I'm not putting my money in that bank. Over time, that will have an impact. But but my fear now is people not realizing that we are already beyond that 1.5 degrees. And for us here in Britain, we are already warned. And when I go back to when I was at school doing geography, and we used to talk about the Gulf Stream, this wonderful Gulf Stream that brought all that lovely warm water up from down off the coast of the Caribbean, and it kept our waters mild and brought all these wonderful wildlife up to the north, to the Arctic to spawn. We've now been told that, in our lifetime, the risk is very, very high that Gulf Stream will reverse. And the consequences of that will be immediate, not, over hundreds of years. It will be immediate, So there's things that are happening, but we can't sit back and say, it's nature, it's going to happen. It's not nature. It's our natural instinct to say, I'm so exhausted from saying, don't do this, but just keep doing it. But find those things that you have your biggest impact in. And it might just be turning up to, one event that is listening to a talk about it and how you can change. But to be fearful can be paralyzing. And to be paralyzed means you're not doing anything. So I would say be more like Boudica. and face your worst enemy and defeat it.
Absolutely, Susie. I can see your concern. I can see why it's important to continue to ask questions, be inquisitive, and obviously have that empathy to generations that are going to come after you, even though you may not be here. The interesting thing I found on Instagram, Susie, there's a photo of you and King Charles together. It's unclear who's bowing to who. Do you want to clarify that?
I think it was that suit I was wearing. I made that by hand. It was hand woven up in Scotland, the Isle of Skye, on a loom that was pedaled with a bicycle to make it electric. And I sewed it by hand. I'd finished the buttonholes literally 2:00 in the morning before I went to, I tell you, it's a funny story. I think it's funny, but because it was November last year. And so I've got this, and it was a 1940s style pattern, but tweed. And I like to support textile industries that are, relying on order. So, but when I turned at Windsor Castle, it was cold and raining. But all the other ladies who were in attendance, who were also a lot of women coming to receive an award, they were all dressed in florals, like they were going to a wedding. And I looked like I'd come to collect the children. It's like, Nanny's here. But it was okay. It was fine. King Charles is an organic farmer. I mean, I've been to his gardens. It's not very far away from me. He is an organic grower. And so through the organic industry, we know so much about how he's been an advocate for organic agriculture for years and years and years. But I was actually amazed that he knew so much about nature care. The hat I had on my head, I had made locally. A lady up in the Cotswolds who made that. I never wear hats because I don't have enough hair, but she made this hat for me to go with the suit. And my only paranoia walking over there was I have to have a curtsy or you nod. It's more modern to nod, right? But I'm thinking, and I had to wear this to hold the hat on. So if I nod, this hat's going to fall on the floor. So I did a little dip. And you could see the conversation was all about the environment. It was all about the environment. And it was very, 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 very personal because I understood and he understood. So we're talking on the level of environment and organic. He says, I hear you being a bit of a troublemaker. I said, yeah, that's exactly how I would describe myself. So I think we were both nodding to the fact that I see you for what you've done and I received the medal. But I also, it was for me a nod back to him that I really appreciate how much he'd done for the organic industry, speaking out when people were, back in the day, they were, they call us cranks or whatever. So it was, I think we were nodding to each other. I like to think so.
That was really beautifully captured. So you didn't end up leaving with any of the royal grandchildren? Prince Louis didn't go off with you thinking you were the nanny?
It would have been sweet, wouldn't it? It would have been quite nice. I've never been in Windsor Castle before. I've been to Buckingham Palace. I never met the Queen, but I had never been in Windsor Castle before. And of course, when I went to Buckingham Palace, having been an art student, when I went to Buckingham Palace, we won the Queen's Award for Enterprise 5 years ago. So as an award winner, you go. And there's so much art on the wall. I must be on every security camera in both Buckingham Palace and Windsor, because I just had my nose this far away from these magnificent works of art that I'd only ever seen in books. It was incredible. It was such a treat. I felt like it was like my birthday and Christmas all come into one. And then I got a medal as well.
That's amazing. Do you ever, when you walk into some place like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, where people are typically, especially the parts that you've been to, it's invite only. Nobody can walk in. It's a very, I guess, sacred historical place. Lots of history there. Do you ever pause and think, Susie, you've done well. You've done well. Maybe it's not in Windsor Castle. Maybe it's in your home in Bristol. But what are those moments where you pause and good job, Susie?
My husband says, why do you always talk about your upbringing? Because I know where my roots are. I came from a working class family, and I brought in an inner city area where the toilet was outside. We only had cold water. My mum worked hard to become a nurse. My dad built, those pictures you see of guys on the steel building the Empire State Building? My dad did that, not in the Empire State Building, but that was his job. So, it was work hard. And often, and I'm sure there are children around the world today where society splits up and said, oh, you're never going to be able to achieve this because look where you come from. And I take the view that it doesn't matter what the soil is where your feet were planted. It's what you grow into. I didn't feel privileged. I felt, do you know what? You put your mind to something and you really commit to what you believe and do things for the best, because there were women there who were, they were in the volunteer sector, and there were all sorts of people there. There wasn't just, people who were businesses or companies or authors, musicians. I felt very much that it shows that when you believe you can do something and you're not deterred by, naysayers who say, well, you can't do this. I mean, especially being a woman, can you imagine? I couldn't even get in a bank overdraft when I first started. I felt that it was true that you can get there and you can be seen by what you would say, or the upper echelons of society, as being a valued partner. And the medals, the MBEs and the CVs and all those are an acknowledgement that you're a partner in something. So yeah, I didn't feel privileged. I felt that I'd worked hard enough and done enough to say that I didn't go there with imposter syndrome, even if I did look like the nanny.
That's probably the only time. But then again, not a bad situation to be in if you leave with Charlotte,
with the children,
and George.
Actually, the people in Windsor Castle were very, very, very well. All the staff in there, they worked very hard to make you feel at ease. I'm not fazed by being amongst people from different societies. I know where I came from, and I've mixed with all sorts of people from all over the world. So I feel comfortable with people. And if you treat people as just people, they're just human beings like you, and you don't, wrap them up in fancy dressing, then you come to speak on the same level of understanding. So the fact that when I got to that point in that beautiful room that I never even got to see because I was so worried about my hat falling off. Well, I did see it, but I didn't take it all in. Was that I was very conscious that this wasn't somebody just handing something down to me. It was the fact that I'd reached up and I'd been given it. And I think everyone out there, no matter, it doesn't have to be an MBA, it could be, and I was proud when I got my first needlework certificate from my needlework teacher, because she was I heard her voice over my shoulder while I was finishing off those buttonholes at 2 o'clock in the morning, telling me, if you don't get this right, I'm going to make you unpick it. It's a lesson I learned. Do it right the first time. So I think we can all, we should all grasp that we can do. We can, and don't let people say you can't do. They may make it difficult for you, but it's finding the way around. If you don't have the internet, go to the library. If you don't have financial support, then cut your cloth according to your measure. I worked for 10 years without any salary in this group. Everything that came into the company went back into the company. Amazingly enough, maybe I should say I drive an electric car, but I don't have an electric car. I have a bicycle, but I have a 25-year-old Saab that I have had for 25 years that gets used very little. But I don't, I'm not a person that seeks the trappings of success. I prefer to support organizations like 1% for the planet, or through, like, we've just been to an organization here called Music Works, which helps people who are in communities that are not as well served as many, and might have a diverse community, and get them off the streets and learning how to sing, to play instruments, to produce, to be DJs, whatever. I prefer that we support organizations that are helping others to rise up. Because all boats don't float. We know that. We know that whole adage there. They don't. Some of them, they need life buoys, and that's where I feel giving back. So I have to say thank you to everyone who buys Nature Care, because of that you are supporting all these organizations that we give money back out to help make change happen, to help them rise up, to become things that they want to achieve, to be good at the things they want to be, or to reach out and take that next step up. Or even if it is, through what we're doing on our e-commerce, and we've got an e-commerce site now. Not that we're not ever going to be not available in retailers, but obviously we don't reach everybody everywhere. But I just bought in for our e-commerce a reusable pad that comes from a project in India called EcoFem, where women are making these products using organic materials. And through that, 1-for-1, it means that everyone that we buy in and that consumers buy produces one pad for a girl in India. It also contributes to education programs. People might not think that when they buy a product. What goes on down the line? How is this made? Who benefits? Who am I giving my money to? Who really benefits? And that is important for us as a brand. And it's important for us as a brand because it's important for me. Because I came from not having anything. And I know that sometimes it's a very small amount that makes a huge difference to someone to get that start button pressed.
That's amazing, Susie. And thank you for sharing that, because I think what you've really clearly outlined there is how what you put money back into the business, but you've also given boys or I guess life buoys to organizations that need it. I want to ask you about another kind of sustainability, and the fact that how have you managed to sustain a business for almost 40 years with the energy that you have? Because I noticed, like you mentioned, you're up till 2 a.m. sewing those buttons. You're up till 1 a.m. telling your husband, hey, I'm about to go crazy on you. I want to launch a company. So you seem like that entrepreneur who has those ideas in your head and you just need to chew on it for a bit. How have you sustained this and still remained energetic and present and able to run a company for so long?
I mean, I am vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian all my life. When I say I've been a vegetarian all my life, psychologically, I've been vegetarian all my life. But my mother, you had to eat what was put on the plate. I've always had a lot of energy. I played sport all my life. I did, whether you know or I don't know, but back in December 2019, I had breast cancer surgery. Then I had radiotherapy right at the beginning of COVID lockdown. And at that point, I also felt, I'm just going to carry on. I'm not going to. So it was kind of, it was kind of inside me that things aren't going to hold me back. So I don't know where that, I don't know where that, maybe maybe I'm OCD. Maybe that's what it is. I have an innate energy that I can't be not doing anything. If I sitting down, when they say, like, I have a garden, I have a lovely, I have a wildlife garden here. We have a wildlife garden at work as well. And if I go in the garden, nobody sees me for like 8 hours. And it's not like picking and pricking, it's sweat, spade, digging, pulling, chopping. So I can't sit still. If I'm sitting still, I'm probably asleep momentarily. You could probably go, or I just have this innate energy. And I think it comes from the fact that I'm very conscious. Time goes quickly. I'm not at a time where I'm thinking, oh my God, I might die tomorrow. Or I've always felt that. Today is the day. To putting things off till tomorrow is no good, because I've missed what I could have achieved today. So I'm sorry you can't go and buy it. It's something that I've had my entire life. And in terms of my energy, actually, sometimes my husband will say to me, I don't eat breakfast, and I have quite a light lunch. He says, how do you keep going? I said, I must be a natural hunter-gatherer. I must be, because I need to get things done, and then I'll sit and then I'll eat. So I do have that kind of very light diet. I like to get out in the fresh air when I can, walking or cycling or gardening or playing with my grandkids. But other than that, staying healthy, it is a case of I love what I do because I can see I'm making a difference. I mean, even when things go wrong, things can go wrong. There are things that can be a complete pain in the neck. But I don't sit back and think, I can't do this anymore. I've got to solve this problem. I've got to keep going until it's solved. So it is kind of, I'm like a firework that just, those candles that you keep blowing out on a cake and they just keep coming back. I think that concept is me.
Well, Susie Hewson, thank you so much for joining me on The Ginny Show. I could talk to you for hours. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much for sharing time with me.
Thank you. Be kind to yourself now.